Hey, what's up everybody? So, Animation Nodes 2.0 is released, and with it, there are some changes we need to cover before we can move forward with future videos. First, I would like to say despite the changes, all of my old videos will still work perfectly fine as I was working with the developer while making those to make sure that they would not become outdated when 2.0 released. I will also not be covering every single change in this new update as there are far too many to cover, so I will only be covering the big changes and the ones that relate to my older videos. The rest I will be covering as we use them in the future. Now, I haven't covered mesh editing in any of my videos so far, and that is because I knew there was going to be some major changes in this new version. However, for those of you who have messed with it yourself, you may have noticed two data types, the polygon data type and the vertex data type. Both of these have been removed in Animation Nodes 2.0. Which means old projects that have used those will not be compatible with this new version. It is an easy fix though, as they have been replaced with new nodes that use the vertex location and edge indices to accomplish the same effect. Now, if you've watched my previous videos, you'll notice that I used the term effector. Now, this was taken from Cinema 4D's MoGraph, which uses the term effector to describe a gizmo that could be used to animate and drive effects. Now, previously in Animation Nodes, we had to make our own effectors by using empties and somehow bringing in the position and the scale to drive effects in our node tree. However, Animation Nodes now has something called FallOffs. These are essentially effectors, which are new nodes which allow us to take positional data and use that to drive values in our node tree. Besides some basic fall-off types such as directional and point distance, we can also use objects directly as a fall-off controller. This allows us to animate the size and scale of the fall-off using Blender's internal animation controls. We can also use audio to drive the fall-off inputs and create some really cool effects. Another new addition in the update is ID keys. These allow you to set initial properties that you can then bring into animation nodes. For example, if I had a cube at 0, 0, 0 and I wanted to add 1 to the Z position, a problem I would run into would be if I add 1 to it, it would take 0, 0, 0 and make it 0, 0, 1. But then, because animation nodes repeats, it would be 0, 0, 2 and 003 and 004, and I've just skyrocketed my cube into oblivion. Now what we can do is, before we bring it into animation nodes, we set the initial transforms, and then we can recall that ID key in animation nodes and use that as the position to add to. And now the cube stays at 001. While that might not sound useful for a cube, when you're dealing with thousands of instanced objects, this can be very, very helpful. ID keys can also be used to set object indexes based on selection order, object name, distance, and more. This is really helpful if you want a bunch of parts to be animated in a specific order. For example, when I made the falling house demo for my animation nodes intro, every single one of those fence posts had to fall in a specific order. Now, in order to get those in the specific order I needed, I had to manually add those to a list, and this was very inefficient and time consuming. Now, with ID keys, all I would have to do is hit C to bring up brush select, click and drag in the order I want them to fall, and then simply hit sort and from selection. And now I can bring that into animation nodes and they will all fall in the correct order. The last feature I want to cover today isn't something that we can now accomplish with animation nodes, but something that changes the way we interact with it. And that is the fact that lists can now be automatically iterated through without having to manually add a loop subprogram. This makes it easier to set up quick effects, and it also makes it faster and cleaner to make more complicated effects. The way it works is simple. With most nodes, you can simply plug in a list, and it'll automatically be applied to all the items in that list. In order to accommodate this, a lot of nodes can also now output lists. It's better to see this in a quick example. Here, I have a small sphere that is instanced 1024 times. If I hit Ctrl A and add in a random vector, I can check the list output box and then plug the object list into the count to get a get length. This will now output as many random vectors as we have instanced cubes. Next, if I simply hit Shift A, object, transform output, check the X, Y, and Z, plug the object list into the object input, and the vector list into the location input, you can see it now applies the object transform output for every object in that list. And I can simply adjust the random vector scale to change the scale of the random vector output. For comparison, this is what it would look like in Animation Nodes 1.6. As you can see, the new way is much cleaner and much more efficient. It is important to note that this is not a complete replacement for loops, as loops will still be needed for more complex tasks. Before the update, I was really limited to what I could cover without it becoming outdated. Now that it's out of the way, I can't wait to really dive into some cool projects with animation nodes. If you like this video, be sure to like and subscribe, and if you'd like to help me make future videos, be sure to check out my Patreon page through the link at the end of this video or in the video description. And as always, I will see you next time.